This is a page from a United States government report printed for Congress in 1902. Some clerk had to list every animal that entered the country through one quarantine station in New Jersey. 46 deer, 43 camels, 2 elephants from India, and 1 horned horse. Then, further down the same page, a second horned horse. It was a gnu. It was almost certainly a gnu. But the clerk didn't have the word gnu, so he wrote horned horse and went to lunch. Which means that for one line, in one federal ledger, America imported a unicorn and locked it in a barn in Clifton, New Jersey. So why was a unicorn standing in a New Jersey barn? Because of a law, and the law was about beef. In 1879, Britain decided American cattle were carrying disease and started turning our cows away at the dock. America's biggest export was suddenly worth nothing, so Congress built a whole veterinary agency, not to keep people safe, to keep the beef moving. Then, in 1890, it went further. It became a federal crime to land a hoofed animal anywhere the government hadn't approved. The law covered neat cattle, which is what they called cows, plus sheep and other ruminants. Nobody was thinking about giraffes when they wrote it. But a ruminant is anything that chews its cud. Camels chew. Giraffes chew. The law had quietly caught the entire zoo. So the government needed a door. One door for the whole East Coast, and every hoofed animal in the world had to knock on it. What they were afraid of had a name: foot and mouth disease, the one that ends with entire herds destroyed and buried in a pit. They wanted a waterfront and couldn't find one, so they went 15 miles inland and bought 50 acres of farmland from 6 different farmers. Every animal that landed did its time, 2 weeks for most of them, and a full 90 days if you happen to be cattle. The place was called Athenia. It was not called Clifton because Clifton didn't exist yet. The city arrived 17 years later. 14 brick barns, with walls as clean as a hospital ward. The magazines called it the Ellis Island for animals. It stood there for 80 years, and not one plague ever came through that door. Remember that. It is not the compliment it sounds like. The rule book said it flat out. This is not an exhibition ground. Nobody was allowed to look, and the staff showered before they walked home. The animals almost never came outside. A sick one was never treated. It went back across the ocean, or it never left the grounds at all. Even the unicorn stood in one of those barns. 2 weeks, in the dark, and not one person on Earth was allowed to look at it. So what was in there? 80 years of the strangest arrivals in America. Start with our clerk again, 1903. 39 deer, 12 camels, 1 yak, 1 tapir, 2 zebras, 3 wild boars, and 1 freak cow. Freak cow, not a species, not a breed, just one man's professional assessment, entered into the permanent record of the United States. 1938, 2 giraffes come off a ship in Brooklyn, bound for the San Diego Zoo after 53 days at sea. They had sailed straight through a hurricane. Their food went overboard, and the ship's cook fed them pancakes for 3 days. Clifton is 16 miles from that pier. The truck drove 45 miles because the crate and the necks together stood 12 feet 8 inches. The giraffes were too tall for the Holland Tunnel, so the truck crawled north through Manhattan instead. They squeezed under an elevated train by 1/8 of an inch and crossed the George Washington Bridge. A man ran ahead of the truck, measuring every overpass, 8 miles an hour the whole way. They ate dinner at 11:30 at night. Their keeper was a zoo man named Charlie Smith. For the whole quarantine, he slept in the barn, on a cot, beside their stalls. And lastly, 1949, an okapi lands in New York, bound for the Bronx Zoo. Zebra legs, giraffe face, one of only 2 in the country. He spent his 2 weeks in a Clifton barn and never made a single sound, so the keepers named him Silent Sam. Now go back, before the giraffes, before Silent Sam. 1905, the year the door failed. The government wanted better milk goats, so it bought 65 of them in Malta and shipped them home. Everyone on board drank the goat's milk on the way over. 8 of the 12 crewmen came down with a fever. It was Malta fever. It was in the milk. And by then, the goats were already standing in Clifton. The staff lived on the grounds with their families. An elderly woman there was given the milk for her health, and she fell sick too. And one of the government's own men refused to believe milk could do this. He kept drinking it. By January, he was dead. 9 of the goats froze to death that winter. The rest never left the grounds. The door didn't fail from the outside, it failed from the inside. The government's own goats in the government's own barn. 80 years, and nothing dangerous ever came through that door. The only thing that ever hurt anybody here, they carried in themselves. What finally killed the station wasn't a disease, it was the airplane. The whole place existed because animals came in by ship and left by rail, and after 1950, they started flying. A rail siding in a suburb was suddenly the wrong building in the wrong place, so the government sold it off in slices. Clifton High School stands on the back 40. The city bought the rest, and the government still didn't leave for another 13 years after that. The last shipment left in 1980, and that same year, Clifton built its city hall on the grounds. You can park there today and never know. And the law never changed. A giraffe is still a ruminant. It still owes the government time, 30 days now, instead of 90. It does them in an airport barn in New York, watched by a vet who still showers before he goes home. But back in Clifton, the barns are still standing, all 14 of them, and 2 of them are now an art gallery. A building made so that no one could look inside is now a place you go to look. Walk in, you are standing where the unicorn stood.